Thank you for joining me for my talk on working behind the scenes for Who Do You Think You Are? I'm Gill Blanchard and I'm going to spend the next 45 or 50 minutes or so talking about what it's like being one of the researchers on various episodes for the television programme Who Do You Think You Are? I often get asked, how do they prepare? How do they choose their subjects? What do we actually do for them? Do the celebrities know anything in advance about what they're going to be told on the show? And I hope to answer some of those questions as I go along. One of the things that happens is there's a major amount of preparation that goes on. The television show has been going for 11 or 12 years now. It began back on BBC Two as a one-off series. Nobody anticipated how tremendously popular it would become. It eventually was franchised to every English-speaking country in the world: America, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and so on. And it's still running in some of those countries. It's one of the most popular, if not the most popular, non-fiction show produced for the BBC. The production company behind it, or a private production company, they enter into a contract with the BBC. And what happens is that they have a professional genealogist who oversees all the projects, but every single episode has its own production team. And they are the people that do research themselves and bring in other researchers, seek out experts in particular fields, arrange the filming, sites, get in touch with archives, locations, and so on. And what happens with people like myself, and I've worked on several different projects over the years, is that we often are approached just to do an initial piece of research, perhaps 1 or 2 hours or 4 or 5 hours on a particular topic. Now, I'm going to talk today about, in particular, and take you through some of the research I did for 2 of the episodes that I've actually appeared on, which is the Johnny Peacock episode and the Mary Berry episode. I've also just literally, up until the week the archives closed in lockdown, was working on a episode that will appear later this autumn, but I'm not allowed to mention anything about it. So you'll have to just keep an eye out and see if you can spot where anything based around where I live in Norfolk. And then you'll know I'm not actually going to be on that episode because they filmed it during lockdown. I have in the past researched and done huge blocks of research for episodes where I've not known anything about who it was for, or even known whether or not that the episode has gone ahead or the celebrity has been featured, because there's so much secrecy involved that where possible they don't tell the researchers who the subject is. In the case of Johnny Peacock, I did know. In the case of the most recent person, I did know, partly because of the surname involved. But where possible, they try and keep a tight lid as possible until they reveal who's going to be in the next series. And they also want to keep as tight a lid as possible on what is in the content of each episode. As a result, we often have to sign non-disclosure agreements. So what's quite typical is something that happened a couple of years ago, where I was approached to do 4 hours research in Suffolk, investigating local almshouses, where I'm finding out, if I could, about some of the inhabitants. Now, I wasn't able to find anything. There were no records surviving and very few other trails that might lead to that information. I never heard anything more. I never knew who it was about. And the only person who had a Suffolk ancestry in that series that appeared after that was the Danny Dyer episode. Now, whether or not it was to do with him, I don't know. But that gives you an idea of how much gets weeded out along the way. Because what the production team are looking for is a story. They start off by talking to the celebrity, the subject, finding out what their interests are, and as far as possible, following those interests. So if a subject says, I want to know more about where they came from or their occupations, they try to find that out as much as possible. And that's one of the reasons why some of the episodes jump around, where they might start on one line and then jump to another or to another theme, because they're trying to answer some of the questions they've been asked at the beginning. One of the other questions I get asked a huge amount is, do the celebrities actually know anything about it? Well, no, because they want to have that element of surprise. This is all about constructing a story and presenting a story. And one of the first production team that I worked with when I appeared on an episode told me how it's almost impossible to replicate genuine surprise. They want to get that shot of a celebrity bursting into tears, bursting out laughing, going, oh my God, that total surprise when something is revealed to them. If possible, they want to get that in one shot, because it's so difficult to replicate that emotion, even for a professional actor. And as I said, each production team works on an individual episode, so they might all have slightly different approaches and different levels of expertise. They try and bring in producers and production assistants that have some background in history or an interest, or have perhaps done some family history research, but they're not necessarily experts. In fact, very few of them are experts in a particular area or a region, even if they've got general knowledge. And that's one of the reasons they bring in professional researchers. And at times that can cause some interesting discussions where perhaps they've come at a source, or they haven't pursued an angle that we might think could have been pursued further, because they don't have the same level of expertise or knowledge. Other things that outside researchers might get called in for are consultation, and also to present information to a subject, and they're not necessarily the person that did the research. So who you see on the screen telling somebody about a discovery isn't always the person that found that information. And I'll talk a little bit more about some examples of that in a moment. And as I said a few moments ago, that element of surprise is absolutely crucial, and it's one of the reasons we're sworn to secrecy. It's also one of the reasons why sometimes you hear about people that have been approached or research has been conducted for an episode and it hasn't gone ahead. One of the other most common reasons is that that's given is that they couldn't find any interesting stories. Well, personally, I think there's always an interesting story. I think everybody's ancestors are interesting. But what is interesting to us is not necessarily the same as what makes a good story for television. I will move on in a moment and talk particularly about the Johnny Peacock episode, and that's the one that I was on most recently. And there's a little example here from some of the documents that were produced and shown to him, in particular featuring his ancestor Louisa Voss, who was described as a reputed bad character, one of three, in 1841.
We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. To watch the extended uninterrupted version, go to familyhistory.tv, link in the description. You will also find a host of talks from other experts on a variety of subjects. Don't forget to subscribe to get notified when these videos become available.